I'm Haroon Mirza.
I'm Dave Maclean.
And we're here today to talk about a record that's been pressed by the Vinyl Factory.
I think the idea was to just, when I first came and saw Haroon's last show here, there were so many of the sounds that to me felt like they could be compiled and kind of documented on record, you know, on vinyl or just in any kind of way. And I suggested to Haroon that we could do a kind of 12-inch thing where I would remix the sounds. You know.
What Dave's done with it in the end is completely a transformation, which is quite cool, you know, and it's, you know, he's basically made a sort of dancehall track.
There's something quite fun about taking a sound that's come from something and making it into something unrecognizable, so making the click of the electricity, turning a light on and off, making that into a snare drum or a bass drum, you know, once you've got a sound, there's a lot you can do with it. You can manipulate it and stretch it and change it in kind of infinite ways. You know, I guess there's just a crossover where we're both into art and music, but I'm more doing music and Haroon's more doing art, but we always want to kind of cross them over and kind of blur the boundaries more. And
I think one of the most interesting things is like when you do something like that, because the audiences for art are very different to the audiences for music. Well, they're not very different. There is a lot of crossover, and really they're not very different, but there are sort of different audiences to a degree. And I think for me, one of the most interesting things is having different audiences in the same space together, like, you know, being in that, and not knowing that they're kind of mixed up sort of thing, you know, it's like a...
I think there's also there's a different kind of mindset and a different expectation in a gallery, so you're expecting to be more kind of tuned in to things, I guess, and your attention can be a lot more focused.
I mean, there's a long history of this, you know, and people always kind of refer back to John Cage and maybe people like Stockhausen, but even before them there was people doing the same thing.
I think as long as there's been music and galleries, you know, from Kurt Schwitter's to Fluxus to guys in the 60s that were hanging out in makeshift galleries in New York, or
Velvet Underground with Andy Warhol. There's so much, you know, and then musicians in the history like Edgar Varese. And I think, you know, art and culture always go back to the same things, and there might be new materials in the world to play around with, so it kind of looks new or seems new, but nothing's the narratives and the ideas are never really new.
I think the environment kind of dictates if something's art or music more than anything, you know. And when you're in a gallery, as I say, I think you're more in tune with what's going on, partly because of the white wall thing, is that, you know, there's nothing really else to focus on, so you don't have clutter, so your mind's a lot clearer and you can really kind of appreciate things about techno music, you know, throughout Detroit techno and that kind of style of music that Haroon's influenced by, you know. I think from Kraftwerk to Derek May, there's something quite thought-provoking about machines making music, you know. And
the simplicity of it as well, you know, the simplicity of some of the sort of the techno that came out of Detroit, or comes out now from Detroit actually, and Kraftwerk as well, you know. When you think about it, at the time, yeah, it was computer music, so it sounded different, but it was also very simple, it was quite minimal. But then at the same time there's so much to it, you know. Especially with like house music and Chicago house, you know, you can literally have a record that's a drum pattern generated from a, you know, 909 or something, and a bass line and a 303 bass line, and then a vocal, and that's it. That's three elements, and it's brilliant. This, you know.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of something being made by a machine that can have the spiritual energy, if you like, to make people dance, because people dancing is a very human characteristic. It's very kind of soulful and spiritual, yet the machines are making you dance, so it's this kind of coming together of bleeps and robots and something quite kind of, I don't know, kind of primeval in everybody to dance. And
the other interesting thing is, that's actually, and the principle is the same in many of my works, is that it's the sound of electricity. It's a direct sound of electricity, and then it's manipulated in various ways. But the thing with electricity is it's actually live. Electricity is it's not fixed. It's not like a. We say machines, but electricity itself is a live phenomenon. It's a real phenomenon, and because the way electricity works. It's an AC current is an alternating current that fluctuates between, it's supposed to be 50 hertz, but it's never actually 50 hertz. So, that could be plotted on a graph, and that graph is a non-linear thing. It's not, there's no pattern to it. It's completely random.
There's something very kind of pure about the physical form of a record, that this kind of object creates sound, And it's possibly the pinnacle of sound quality as well, which is quite interesting, because as music becomes more digital, I think the sound quality kind of, at the moment anyway, just kind of loses something. And yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that records have outlived every other medium, for musical reproduction. Records have been around for a long time, and so many things have come in since records and disappeared. But we're still pressing records, so there's something to be said about that. There's a reason for that. I think it's partly DJ culture, but there's something else.
When I started out DJing and was getting into hip hop DJing, I didn't have a sampler, so I would make loops by sticking masking tape on the right bit of the record, so it hit the masking tape and jumped back, and then created a drum loop, and then over the top of that I would scratch and mix. And there's other things I used to do, like put a roll of masking tape on the turntable, put the record on it, and then put the needle upside down and play the record from underneath, and it would go backwards. And you could do that with techno and mix in a backwards record. And there was all kinds of things that we used to do, to try and make things weird, And I think that, that's just essentially what Haroon's doing here, is taking everyday things and making them weird.
This is the first time I pressed a record. I'd never been to a vinyl cutting session before, but when I saw that lathe and that machine, and I just thought, wow, there's stuff you can do, So this record, the track, the needle the groove just stops, and the needle's just left to do whatever it wants, and it kind of jumps forward and comes back and plays, so it becomes really random. So the tool itself, so the vinyl itself is a platform for making things, doing things, There's still stuff to explore with vinyl, the medium itself.